Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to France.
Ooh la la.
Yeah, exactly. We're checking out what's happening in French shops, specifically buralistes.
Ah, yes, the burlists.
You know those like classic corner stores?
Yeah, you can get your cigarettes there and,
Lottery tickets,
yeah,
all sorts of things.
little snacks, maybe a newspaper.
Exactly. And what we're looking at today is a new technology that they're starting to implement in these buralists.
Interesting.
It's facial analysis technology, and they're using it to check if customers are old enough to buy things like cigarettes.
Makes sense.
But is it a good idea? That's what we're going to try to figure out today.
So to figure that out, we should probably start by explaining how it works.
Yeah, we'll go on here.
So it's not actually facial recognition.
Yeah.
They're not saving your information or anything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's not about figuring out who you are. It's just trying to figure out how old you are.
So, like it's not Big Brother.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
So you walk up to the counter and there's a little camera.
And it just scans your face.
Oh.
And it's super quick, too.
And that's it. That's all it takes.
Well, unless it thinks you might be underage, then you have to show your ID.
So it's like a super fast digital version of a cashier just looking at you and guessing.
Pretty much, but way more accurate from what we're seeing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they say it can guess your age within about a year.
Wow. That's impressive.
And it's supposed to help them follow those French laws about selling things to minors, you know?
Right. Right. Cigarettes and lottery tickets and all that.
Exactly.
Okay, so it makes sense why they'd want to use it. But how do people feel about it?
You know what? Most of the reactions have been pretty positive.
Really?
Yeah, people like that. It's faster than digging out your ID,
I can see that.
and they trust that the system is fair, you know?
Like a machine doesn't have a bad day.
Exactly. It's just data and algorithms.
So they see it as more objective.
Right.
Okay, so there's the convenience and the trust, but
Right.
I'm guessing there's some concerns too.
Of course there are.
Like what? Well, the big one is that it could be wrong.
Oh, yeah, what if it thinks you're too young and you're not?
Exactly. Then you have to show your ID anyway, and it kind of defeats the purpose.
And it's probably embarrassing.
I would think so, yeah. And then there's the whole issue of privacy.
Oh, yeah, France is pretty serious about data privacy, right?
Very serious. They have this organization called the CNIL.
Right, the Data Protection Authority.
And they've pointed out that even if it's not facial recognition, they are still collecting data.
Interesting.
Like, is it truly anonymous? And do they need to be scanning everyone, even if they're not buying age-restricted stuff?
Yeah, that's a good point.
They think it might be a bit too much information gathering.
So it's like a trade-off, right?
Yes.
Faster age checks, but maybe less privacy.
Right. And then there's also the cost of this technology.
Oh, yeah. How much does it cost?
Well, the devices themselves are between 588 and 1,000 euros each.
Ooh, that's a chunk of change.
It is, but on the other hand, if they get caught selling tobacco to a minor, the fine is 750 euros.
So maybe it makes sense financially in the long run.
Maybe, especially because it seems like this tech is becoming more and more popular.
How much is it spreading?
They say it's already in hundreds of shops across France.
Really?
And they're doing this big pilot program in a region called Indre-et-Loire
Oh.
with like 50 shops trying it out.
So is this the future? Like, are we all going to be getting our faces scanned when we buy a pack of gum?
Maybe, who knows? It's definitely something to think about.
Well, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go back to those customer reactions for a minute.
Okay, good idea.
What were people actually saying about their experiences with this technology?
Yeah, let's dive into that a bit more.
Okay, so let's see.
I found some interesting comments.
Okay, what did they say?
Well, one thing that really jumps out is just how many people seem to be okay with it.
Like they're not freaked out by the whole face scanning thing?
It seems like a lot of them see it as more of a convenience thing, you know?
Like it saves time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I hate digging around for my ID,
Right. It's like nobody likes that part.
especially when you're in a hurry.
Yeah, exactly. And this tech just makes the whole thing faster and smoother.
For everyone involved.
Yeah, the cashier doesn't have to like squint at your ID and try to do the math in their head.
And we talked about that trust factor before, like people feeling like a machine is more objective.
Right. And I found this story about a woman who always gets carded because she looks young.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. And she was saying that this technology actually made it less awkward for her.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Because with the cashier, it always feels like they don't believe you.
Right, like you're trying to pull one over on them.
Exactly. But with the machine, it's just like, okay, scan pass, move on.
So it takes the personal element out of it.
Which in some cases can be a good thing.
I guess so. But it does make you wonder if we're getting too used to machines making decisions for us.
That's a really good point.
Like, where does it stop?
It's something we need to think about for sure.
I mean, it's not just in buralists, right? This whole automation thing is everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Think about self-checkout at the grocery store.
Or those ads that follow you around the internet.
Yeah, or those algorithms that decide what you see on social media.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it.
It is, and it's hard to know sometimes what the downsides are, you know?
Right. Like, is it all just convenience or are we giving up something important?
Exactly. And I think the best thing we can do is just be aware
Aware of what?
of how these technologies work, what data they're collecting, and how that data might be used.
So we need to be informed consumers.
Exactly, and we need to ask questions.
Like what?
Like, what are the trade-offs here? Am I okay with giving up some of my privacy for this convenience?
And if we're not okay with it, we need to say something.
Exactly, we have a voice and we need to use it.
We need to have these conversations about the ethics of technology.
Exactly, because it's not just about this one thing, it's about the bigger picture.
Right. It's about how we want to live in the future with all this technology around us.
Exactly. So bring it back to the buralists.
Yeah.
We've seen that there are some potential benefits to this facial analysis tech.
Like speed and efficiency.
Right. And maybe even a sense of objectivity.
But there are also some big concerns about privacy and accuracy.
Right. And we can't forget about the cost either.
So it's not a simple yes or no answer.
Definitely not.
It's a complicated issue with a lot of different factors to consider.
Exactly. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, like, is this the beginning of something much bigger, or is it just a fad?
I guess only time will tell.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one thing we haven't really talked about yet.
What's that?
The potential for bias in these algorithms.
Oh, that's a really important point.
Yeah, because any technology that uses data can be biased.
Absolutely. If the data itself is biased, then the algorithm will be biased too.
So what does that mean for facial analysis?
Well, it means that certain groups of people might be more likely to be misidentified or flagged as underage.
Oh, wow. So, like, is this technology going to be discriminatory?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something that researchers are really looking into.
So is it possible? Like, could this technology actually be discriminatory, even if it's not intentional?
It's definitely a possibility, and it all comes down to the data.
How so?
Well, like I said before, any algorithm is only as good as the data it's trained on.
Right. Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. And if the data reflects existing biases in society, then the algorithm will just learn those biases and perpetuate them.
So in this case, are we talking about biases related to age or something else?
It could be age, but there are also concerns about biases related to race and gender.
Oh, wow. Like how?
Well, for example, there's been some research that suggests that facial analysis algorithms might be less accurate for people with darker skin tones.
Really?
Yeah, and there are also concerns about how these algorithms might perform for women who wear headscarves.
That's really concerning. Like, what are the implications of that?
Well, it means that certain groups of people might be more likely to be misidentified or flagged as underage, even if they're not.
So it's like a double whammy. They're already facing discrimination in society, and then this technology comes along and potentially makes it worse.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to be aware of these potential biases and to advocate for systems that are fair and equitable for everyone.
So what can we do? Like, how do we make sure that this technology isn't used to discriminate?
Well, for starters, we need to demand transparency from the companies that are developing these algorithms.
Like, they need to tell us how they're training their algorithms and what data they're using.
Exactly, and we also need to push for independent audits of these systems to make sure they're not biased.
And I guess we need to be having these conversations like we are right now.
Right, we need to keep raising awareness about these issues and make sure that everyone understands the potential risks.
Because it's easy to get caught up in the convenience factor and forget about the bigger picture.
Exactly. We need to remember that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
It all depends on who's wielding it and what their intentions are.
Right, and that's why it's so important to be engaged and to make our voices heard.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation.
I agree. It's a lot to think about.
We started out talking about facial analysis technology and French buralists, and we ended up talking about some really big issues like privacy bias and the role of technology in society.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is, and it shows just how complex these issues are.
There are no easy answers.
Definitely not. But I think the most important thing is to be aware of the questions to ask.
Exactly, because once you start asking questions, you start to see the world differently.
And you start to understand the power that we have as consumers and as citizens to shape the future of technology.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
I think so. So To all of our listeners out there, keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better future.
That's a great message to end on.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.